How to Fix Your Fat Ass in 5 Easy Steps. Healing Physiology and Philosophy with Prometheus, Faust, Kierkegaard for High IQ People. Written by Peter Rogers, MD. Narrated by Peter Rogers, MD. Copyright August 1st, 2018. Chapter 1. Prometheus, Soteria, Kierkegaard. I am medical Prometheus. I give you fire. What is medical fire? Vegetarian diet with no oils. Why vegetarian? Vegetarian diet is the most powerful maker of health and preventer of disease on planet Earth. Why do I say that? Because it is true, backed up by mountains of epidemiology evidence. We're not talking about 3-month studies with 20 Psychology 101 class volunteers for extra credit who are there to generate paid-for data. We're talking about decades and centuries with data from hundreds of millions of people. What is this book about? It explains how people get fat and sick. It shows the best ways to optimize body weight, especially see Chapter 10. It shows the best ways to prevent disease, the best ways to speed recovery. Who am I to talk? Your friendly neighborhood scholar man. I come from a land down under with a family of doctors, and I spent my entire life practically in universities and hospitals with 99% board scores in med school and residency, board certifications in 3 fields. I was fat for 4 years and I couldn't lose the weight. You can't just do it by willpower. Exercise more and eat less doesn't work. That's the mantra of chumps. I finally decided to read everything on the subject, and that was about 15 years ago, and I've kept the weight off since then. What does soteria mean? I've also taught that to many patients. Soteria means deliverance in Greek. Vegetarian diet delivers people from fat to thin, from high cholesterol to low cholesterol, from impotent to boner city. What about the joy of junk food and meat and oils? That is the path to Pinocchio's Pleasure Island Carnival. It's fun at first, but then their bodies turn into donkeys, and then they get sold into slavery. The modern version is that their bodies turn into fatzos, and then they are pulled into a whirlpool of sickness and suffering. Why Kierkegaard? Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish Socrates, said, "It is not a question of what I should think, but of what I must do." It's easy for Hegel to talk about a synthesis in philosophy, but in real life one must choose, either or. The anxiety of a new challenge or the stagnation of the old path. Why for high IQ people? There are 3 categories of patients. The first category is self-destructive persons who tend to smoke a lot of cigarettes or drink a lot of alcohol or abuse other substances. These patients are about 10%. Self-destructive patients and persons, they tend to go downhill fast. The human body can't heal when it is overwhelmed by tobacco and other toxins. Now, the next 80% of patients are average persons, and they tend to quite often have great personalities, and most of my favorite people have average intellects. However, persons of average intelligence usually are willing to comply with general medical advice like take your medications, but they do not read on their own. The average group tends to get fat in their 40s, diabetic in their 50s, and the average group is usually saddled by sickness in their 60s, and the Grim Reaper tends to ride them into the grave between the ages of about 60 to 75 years old. I desperately want to help the average group of patients, but they seldom change their ways. The average person would rather be diabetic and go blind and get their legs chopped off than become a vegetarian. In order to obtain top 10% outcomes in a country where the majority of people are fat, you have to read. High IQ people account for about 10% of patients, and this book is written for them. The unique thing about the top 10% is that they are willing to read books on their own. They are willing to change their diet and change their lifestyle and begin an exercise program that they can stay with long term. An average person says, "I want the standard therapy." The person who is knowledgeable about health says, "I want the optimal therapy." Optimal therapy is usually the standard, plus the person makes diet and lifestyle changes. When a doctor or a healthcare worker is sick, What they do is they get a copy of their medical chart and their images, their lab reports, and they walk them around their hospital trying to get opinions off the record from all the experts. And they find out who the best experts are, and they get all these unbundled opinions, just what is all the information that could possibly be known about their condition. And then they make a decision about what to do. Now, the fact that you're reading this book implies you probably have an IQ of at least 115. And what I've seen is the more information you have, the more accurate, realistic view you get of your situation so you can make the best choice on what to do. Average people secretly hope that someone's going to come along and save them. Smart people know that the only people who really love you are your mother and your father. And you have to save yourself. You know, maybe you're lucky your brothers and sisters love you too, your spouse, who knows. But the important thing to realize is you have to figure out how to save yourself. And here's a quote from Ray Bradbury, the author. "The public library is better than college. People should educate themselves. You can get a complete education for no money at the library." High IQ people are routinely fit in their 70s and their 80s. I've seen lots of healthy, sharp doctors still working and physically fit in their 70s and 80s. It's quite impressive. Okay? Now, why does a person have to read? Here's a quote from the book Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi. Quote, "Oh, I am sick and tired of always being a puppet," cried Pinocchio. "It's about time I became a man." Here is a quote from Malcolm Muggeridge. Quote, "Only dead fish swim at the stream," unquote. Now, most people in this country are fat and sick after 40. If you want to be healthy, you have to be different than most people. To be a conformist, you just need to copy the people around you. That's easy. But to be in the top percent, you have to develop your own system of priorities. To be a unique individual, you have to read to build up strong reasons for your choices so that you will be able to withstand peer pressure. Now here's a quote from Ayn Rand, the philosopher. Quote, "In order to live, a man must act. In order to act, he must make choices. In order to make choices, he must define a code of values. In order to define a code of values, he must know what he is and where he is. He must know his own nature and the nature of the universe. He needs philosophy. He cannot escape this need for philosophy. His only alternative is whether the philosophy guiding him is to be chosen by his mind or by chance." Unquote. Now, what should a person read? A person should read about whatever problem you have, be it obesity or diabetes or obnoxious personality. Read about the vegan diet. What I've seen is a person goes through a transitional phase when they're improving their diet, health, and exercise and whatnot, and they often have a lot of peer pressure. Their related family and friends and community quite often is a bunch of fat people and who eat a junk food diet, and so there's peer pressure on them to continue their old bad habits. So reading the books is almost like having extra friends around to provide emotional and informational support to get them through that transition phase to becoming healthier. The next question, what is the most important blood test? The most important blood test in all of medicine is total cholesterol. What is the ideal total cholesterol? Less than 150. Why is 150 the key number to know for total cholesterol? Because persons who maintain their total cholesterol below 150, they almost never have a heart attack. They are very unlikely to ever have a stroke, okay? And they're much more likely to maintain sexual potency into their 60s and 70s and 80s. Now, the number 150 for desirable total cholesterol level is based on the Framingham study and the Dr. Esselstyn paper from 2014. Now, what about Shakespeare? To be a vegan or not to be a vegan? That is the question which will determine your fate in terms of body weight, arterial patency, and lots of other stuff.